2011 marks the beginning of the war in Syria. 6 years later, the Syrian government has lost a lot of their land. They now only control about 22% of Syrian territory. So you will want to know this because Russia has started intervening in Syria, and this could lead to a war with the United States, which will ultimately lead to a World War III. In this speech, I'm going to be telling you about the war in Syria, and there are three main points in understanding the war. First, I'm going to be telling you about the events leading up to the war. Second, I'll be telling you about who's fighting in the war and the rise of ISIS. And third, I'll be telling you about the United States and Russian intervention. So let's begin with the events leading up to the war. Back in 2011, a group of 15 schoolboys, all aged 10 to 15, decided to spray paint a slogan on the wall reading, "The people want to topple the regime." And the Syrian government has had a past of not tolerating any anti-government gestures, so they decided to arrest the 15 schoolboys. This obviously upset the families, so they decided to confront the head of security, where they were just told to forget their kids, have sex with their wives, and make more. This obviously upset the families further, so they decided to march on over to the local governor's office, where they were peacefully protesting when officers there opened fire, killing 4 people there. This news quickly spread around Syria, but not much action was taken. A couple days later, the boys were freed. However, they were disfigured with marks of torture, such as extracted fingernails, and they had bruises all over their body. When this news spread around Syria, it wasn't taken quite as easily. This is what actually started the uprising in Syria. People had enough of how the government was handling their things. So basically, what started off as peaceful protests ended up as an all-out war in Syria. So now that we've talked about the events leading up to the war, let's talk about who's fighting in the war and the rise of ISIS. So basically, there are two main fighting sides. There are the rebels and the Syrian government. And within the rebels, there are many different groups or factions, such as the Northern Storm Brigade or the Free Syrian Army, to name a few. Many of the rebel groups are small and operate on a local level. However, some of them have joined together to join a pretty powerful alliance. To add to all the chaos, in early 2014, an extremist group named ISIS began taking over large areas of Iraq, and later moved on into eastern Syria with the goal of forming their own state and enforcing their strict beliefs. And this is where ISIS started to become a problem, because they started gaining more and more land, and they were becoming more powerful. So other nations started seeing this, and other nations saw this and figured they needed to start making a stand against ISIS and try to destroy it. Which leads me to my next point, the United States and Russian intervention. So the United States is against the Assad regime, but they're more opposed to ISIS. So basically, they don't want to destroy the Assad regime because ISIS would just come in after and take over. So in September of 2014, the United States began bombing ISIS positions as well as arming and training moderate rebel groups. A year later, the Syrian government sent out an official request for help to Russia, and Russia decided to intervene because they wanted to show that even with their situation in Ukraine and with their staggering economy, they could still be a pretty powerful country. So in September of 2015, Russia began bombing ISIS positions. However, they were also bombing rebel groups in cover of hitting ISIS. And this is where the United States and Russia began bumping heads, because the United States is the United States is against the Assad regime, and they're helping some rebel groups, while Russia is helping the Assad regime and bombing rebel groups. And this is a pretty dangerous thing, since the United States and Russia, they both have nuclear weapons. So if they were to engage in a war with each other, it would be pretty devastating. So in the speech, I taught you about the events that have happened in Syria. And there are 3 main points that I explained to help you better understand the war in Syria. First, I told you about the events leading up to the war. Second, I told you about who's fighting in the war and the rise of ISIS, and third, I told you about the United States and Russian intervention. And keep in mind that the Syrian government only controls about 22% of Syrian territory. So this means that Russia could be helping Syria more and more in the future, which is again a dangerous thing since they could engage in a war with the United States, which would be a devastating thing because they both have nuclear weapons.